Hello, welcome to the Idea Cast interview series, episode number 87. My guest in this episode is Sherisse Bisram, and I would say that Sherisse, from my impression, is someone who has managed quite well to perform a kind of psycho-emotional alchemy to convert what is an adverse upbringing or adverse background through various factors to become a thriving and flourishing person. And I wanted to share that story with you all, as she wants to share that story with you all as well. And I will read from a statement that she sent me that also encapsulates the person that is Sherisse. And Sherisse seeks to activate women who are eager for radical self-evolution by igniting their inner wildfire, forging indestructible embodiment and fierce self-love. So you'll get a taste of that in this conversation. Those are some pretty strong words, and I endorse that. Not that that matters, but anyway, I had a wonderful conversation with Sherisse, and I hope you enjoy it. And I'd like to welcome Sherisse Bisram to the IdeaCast interview series. I'm looking forward to an inspirational conversation. Maybe that'll be our banner that we'll have over our conversation today, Sherisse. So welcome. I'm so glad to have you here today.
Thank you, Justin. It's an honor to be here and to share the space with you.
Yes, we are sharing a space, and I love that. And in that regard, I would like to welcome the YouTube audience and invite you to share this space with us as a passive observer. But nonetheless, I hope this conversation has an impact on you, help change your trajectory in your life a little bit. I think we're going to be touching on some things that all of us have dealt with to one degree or another. Sherisse has a story that I think is worth sharing. I've researched what she's done in historically and what I believe she will be doing in the future, which we don't want to predict too much, but I have been inspired by and impressed by meeting Sherisse. So in having said that, Sherisse, and setting you up, would you mind sharing with the audience and myself just a background or set us up with a little bit of information that we can carry into the conversation about you or about what you've done in the recent past or even going back further into your formative years?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for the lovely introduction. So my title now is Inner Power Activation Leader, predominantly for women and girls, but everyone is included within that. And I like to say that really the journey to get me to there is a journey of alchemy, because my beginning was very turbulent and difficult in terms of childhood adversity, low income household, growing up in an era that was predominantly, Caucasian. Also, I had an alcoholic parent, as well as just experiencing so much bereavement in my life that it just forced me to armor up so much that I didn't let anything in, didn't let anything out. And I lived I like to call it toxic masculine way of living, because I was just bulldozing forward, full steam ahead. I had a point to prove. And I think my career has been quite creative, I would say. I've been a professional dancer for 11 years. And for anyone that knows the arts industry, it is all about, what you look like and who you are, really. So constantly, my whole life has been a judgment on who I am as a person, in my character, as well as my physicality and my ability, really. So within that, obviously always being judged, I felt like I had a point to prove my whole life. So, this element of resilience is just who I am. It's just something I've constantly had. And I would say it was toxic in the beginning, but it's that survival. If you need to keep going, if you need to get yourself from where you were to where you want to be, you have to push. And I just pushed really hard to the point where I wasn't really enjoying life. My mental health was suffering for it. And when I did get to where I wanted to be, or, to the point of what success would be deemed as, it didn't feel rich. It felt very empty. And I guess I always felt like there was a hole in my life. And then when the pandemic hit, like everyone else, you're forced to do the work, you're forced to stop working and actually have a conversation with yourself. And that was really where I got to know myself fully and take off all of the armor that I've been carrying for the last 28 30 years of my life. And that was the real transformation process for me, was to be like, okay, this makes sense why I've been like that, why the toxic patterns happened, why my mental health was suffering for it. So I got to meet myself really and truly on that part. And then from there, really use the tools that, that have helped me grow in terms of in that point where, even though obviously I was doing this toxic masculine thing, I was trying my best to check in surface level stuff. I got to do the deep dive in the pandemic, really formulate these tools, make sure they work and understand myself, in that process. And then within that, this sort of paved the pathway for the work that I do now. So I did my master's in that time. I started working with a women's charity in that time. And it just gave me a different view of life, because I've always been a people person, and I've always been passionate about female empowerment, passionate about racism, passionate about gender equality. I've always been quite an activist at heart. So I got to really put everything that I'd been doing into play, really. And yeah, that sort of opened up this door to helping other people, and using dance now as a tool to help others, even more so than what I was doing with just teaching. It's now a tool to release endorphins and improve vibrations and all of this lovely stuff. So yeah, I guess that's kind of a nutshell of me and why I do it and who I am.
A very large and elegant nutshell. And you gave us so much just in that. I love that you frame it as alchemy. And when I heard alchemy, I thought, and of course I thought about Carl Jung, but I also thought about a synthesis project. And when you talked about the overt masculinity that was necessary for you to move forward, and that it is toxic because you have to be confrontational. I grew up that way too. I grew up on conflict, constant conflict. And that's just the sort of, if we put masculinity and femininity on a spectrum, I had to inhabit that space of being that toxic male to fight my way out of situations. Normally, and with you, it's, for me, it was the same. It was with a parent that I had to constantly be combative.
Yeah.
And so that you recognize that, I think, is laudable and admirable. And you've spoken about this in other podcasts, that you are all about that integration of this sort of masculine and feminine aspects that we all possess. And I put it on a spectrum. I mean, that seems, non-binary thinking, et cetera, is very present in the social commons now. And so I see it as a utility. Do you want to open on that and the integration of or the balancing in your historical experience of the feminine and the masculine aspects of our beingness?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. I agree. I think it, like you said, it's survival, isn't it? And the reason we step into those roles, I guess, because inherently we feel so. As humans, even as young people, we kind of feel where a space needs to be filled. Otherwise, it's detrimental. And I think, for me, obviously, I just saw that gap was there. And then I felt like I needed to protect and support. And obviously, conflict was constant in my household, but then obviously experiencing racism on a daily basis and things like that. And even, within the industry of where I worked, I felt like, if you didn't have thick skin, you would just get eaten alive, basically. So I feel like it was just part of my nature and my character. And this is a thing, I talk about this quite a lot. It's sometimes all you know is all you know. So when you don't have anything else to compare it to, you just think it's right. So I think this is why we keep developing this energy that maybe doesn't serve us, because we don't see it any other way. And it was, again, in the pandemic where I'd always dabbled in spirituality. I'd always been quite, fond of the idea of it. And I think for me, the energetics of it seems quite spiritual in a way. So when I stopped, and obviously I had to sit down with myself and like do my inner child work and all this inner child healing, I came to the notion that, and the understanding that masculine energy is doing, feminine energy is being. And there wasn't one moment in my life growing up when I was in this toxic masculine force that I'd actually stopped to enjoy things. It was always, what's happening next? Where am I going next? And my body was in a constant state of fight or flight response, and in the fight response. So physically I had, illnesses and stuff as a result of that, constant burnout. And I just didn't enjoy life. So it was that understanding of, okay, the feminine energy is being. You don't have to be valid. And I think this is also the where we're getting this deconstruction of the patriarchal way of being, you know, now, as people are realizing that we don't need to do the hustle culture thing anymore. You know, that constant force and grind hard, that's an old narrative that we're all kind of over, aren't we? We're exhausted by it. So now I think, you know, across everywhere, like the whole world is feeling this, but especially for me in my inner world, I've really found that understanding that I don't need to work hard to be valid. And I think my whole life has been, I've had to do something or be someone to be valid. And I think when I understood that and took that apart and realized that actually I'm enough as I am, regardless of accolades or, you know, whatever it is, that is the feminine energy of just turning up as I am, no front, no ego, not coming in as the big performer or the public speaker. It's just, you know, when I come down to a family meal or a party with friends, I don't need to be switched on or in my ego anymore. Like, and I would say that that's 100% it. To summarize, is that my ego is very toxic masculine, but my inner being that I didn't let free was always feminine. And now I've let the ego go, as much as obviously you need, because obviously you need your ego to survive, but it's there. It's just not on the forefront anymore. And I think that's the balance and polarity that I've found within my own world.
Yeah, yeah, and that's the alchemy, right? I mean, that's the creation process that we have. This sounds judgmental, but we have a responsibility to our fellow persons in our environment to be in charge of that. What I would call an oscillation process, maybe, like we have to go in back and forth, and we can be in that more creative, feminine aspect of ourselves that is more just sort of pure being, like you said. And I like that you said that. That's a wonderful way to frame that. Or that we may have to be more that active energy where we do have to defend ourselves sometimes. We do have to be a little obnoxious in certain situations, I think. But as you've pointed out, it's not healthy to stay there and be the constant combative person. So, and one thing throughout my research on discovering you and learning about you that I would like to open up more, and it ties in to everything you've said, is the value of resilience and the necessity of resilience in our age. We spoke before we went to record that I think people under 40 have grown up in a different landscape, a different environment with technology, and for good and bad. And but I want to maybe add that layer of this complexity of emergence into adulthood from childhood, with this added layer of, say, social media or information saturation, or what I might call just purely intellectual information without wisdom or without the feminine introjection, or no, just the added aspect of that. And I'm getting lost in my words here, but I want to speak to resilience, speak to a younger audience on resilience, because your story is one of resilience, and I find that you know, fragility and all the things that may seem contrary to resilience, it's something that needs to be paid attention to, I think, if I could say it that way without being judgmental. So I'll hand that back to you and see what you think.
Absolutely. Thank you. And I think this is where I talk about the polarity of the masculine energy, because although it was toxic and it was survival, it was necessary. So I think that this is where that resilience builds, because my whole life, if I'd listened to what people wanted me to be, I would 100% not be here now. Like, you know, and that means physically and spiritually, because, you know, the way that the world and experiences had made me feel, I had many times in my life where I'd questioned if I wanted to be doing this anymore, if I wanted to be here. But that burning passion and desire to prove myself kept me going. And that's really what it is. You know, I always talk about us having this inner spark inside of us, this like inner flame. And if we fuel it enough, if we listen to it enough and let it burn bright, it takes over and it burns enough to set your passions alight and keep you going. Now, obviously, with everything, that too much of that could be, you know, expansive ego and power. But for me, it was the right amount to just keep me going. And I think what I would say on that is, if there is something that you want to do in your life or be, and you know more than anything in the world that is going to fulfill you, that is going to make a difference to the world, or whatever it is, if that is what you want to do, you don't need to listen to anyone else that doesn't believe in that. And I think that was really my reality, is like, even when, you know, I was breaking up fights in my home, or like protecting and all of these things, I just knew that this wasn't my life. Like, this wasn't going to be my my song forever, you know. Like, I was going to change the lyrics, I was going to change the beat, and I was going to make a new rhythm for myself. So even at that young age, I'd always just known that I was meant for more. And I think it's that, you know, and I think we all have that understanding and knowing, and that's our intuition. So if you don't listen to that, that's why you feel stuck, that's why you feel in lack, because actually deep down you know you deserve more. And that's the resilience game. It's like, you don't have to give up straight away. You know, if someone tells you no, or if someone says you're not good enough, or, you know, for me, I was the wrong height, I was the wrong skin color, I was the wrong body shape. Did I become a professional dancer in the end? Yes, I did. You know why? Because I kept knocking on doors. And yes, in the wrong sense as well, I knocked down doors that weren't for me, but that's how I learned and grew and became this version of myself now that has a big story to tell. You know, so much of depth to my life is because of what I experienced, and also what I chose to put myself in, you know, in every situation. So now I have a whole, you know, I've got a book inside of me ready to go for whenever I'm ready to write it, because there's so many scenarios in my life where, you know, it could have been. And I always say, I think we're always supposed to get to where we're supposed to get to in life. I always believe that the North Star is where we'll always end up, regardless. But there's many paths that we can take to get there. Sometimes they're detours. And I definitely took detours in my life, like long detours that took me off on a tangent. But ultimately, I came back to myself in the end. And I think it's that little part of knowing that you are worth more. You are deserving of what it is you want. And even though life will try to tell you otherwise, or people will try and tell you otherwise, if you have that strong belief in yourself, that knowing, that will get you to where you need to be. No is not the final answer. And, you know, if it's no from one direction, try a different way around. You know, I said this to one of my clients the other day. It's like, you don't have to queue up through the front door. You can go around the side. You know, we're all trying to follow the same pattern and same pathway to get to a job or a situation. Actually, why don't you just go around the side? Wouldn't that be easier, you know?
Yeah. And that's making good sense of your landscape, when you're surveying your terrain, if you will. I'm trying to use these metaphors, that you have to have novelty. And so one thing I would propose to you, that you can tell me yes or no, is that you do come from an adverse background, adverse conditions. I've always said that adversity breeds character, and that's a little heavy, it's a little judgmental, but I think
No, I agree.
I think so. I would say this to the audience: if you are in your late teens or early 20s and you have come from a harsh background or an adverse background, that was a gift. And you've spoken to this, Sherisse, in other conversations, that it was your master who showed up, it was your teacher who showed up, it was your lodestar. You said the North Star. You know, it's like this guide that lures you forward. And so for those of you who are immersed in adversity, or immersed in toxicity and violence, or whatever it is, that it's terrible and it's harsh, but if you can, as Sherisse has done, sense make it and sort through it, and keep your inner core, your feminine aspect intact. I'll hand that back over to you, Sherisse, but I'm just trying to set this idea up that, you know, we tend to shy away from pain, we tend to shy away from abuse and things, and of course that's a natural response. But when we're in it and we have very little choice, that it can be our teacher, right? I mean, so let me hand that back
Absolutely.
to you and see what you want to add to that.
Yeah, 100% that. Like, you know, even what I said before, I would not be the version of myself now if I hadn't have had that trauma. And when we look at the great people in our, you know, celebrity world, for example, people like Oprah Winfrey and, you know, Barack Obama and people like that have had some real trauma in their life growing up. And then I mean, I don't know so much about Barack Obama, but I know definitely for Oprah, she's the pinnacle of this. You know, that you could go through so many rings of fire and ultimately you come out immune to the fire, right? So I think it's that sometimes we feel burnt when it's hot, you know, like this, whatever the situation is, but ultimately you're just developing thicker skin throughout it. And I know that it feels difficult and hard and heavy, because trust me, you know, I've gone through that valley of the shadow of death over and over again in my life, you know.
Yeah.
And you know, I've now met darkness and he's my friend, you know. So it's like this
Yeah.
idea that we I guess, yeah, the first time you're in something, it feels difficult. And I think the beauty of obviously knowing yourself is understanding that you've gone through it once, you've come out the other side, you'll do it again. And I think that for me is always my thing, is that I've done it, I've been through it, I can do it over and over again. And I say that to anyone else, you know, that I feel like there's multiple ways to look at this, and it depends on obviously, you know, your views on religion or whatever, but ultimately we something chose this life plan for us, right? It didn't choose it for us to fail. It just didn't. It wasn't supposed to be like that. That's my view on this, just 100%, is that you did not come here just to suffer. It had to be for a purpose or a reason, you know, always. And it's like when we talk about you know, we have 4 seasons: the winter, the spring, the summer, the autumn. The sun is not meant to shine all year round, right? I mean, obviously in some parts of the world it does, but there's a reason for everything. So like every season has a reason. So like you have to go inwards in the winter and, like, you know, hibernate, look after yourself, take care of your body. And then in the spring you can start to plan your ideas, and, like, you know, that might be if you're coming out of a traumatic situation, and like you start to get the little buds of like, okay, maybe this isn't it anymore, maybe I'm out the other side. And then the summer is when you're like, wow, like I can actually be free and live my life fully. And then in autumn we start to, you know, come back inward again. It's like, what did I learn from that experience? How can I make sure that I keep this longevity going, or how can I learn more? And then you go back through a different type of winter maybe than you did the last time, or it's the same again and it's painful, but equally, because you did that cycle before, you can do it again. So it's just understanding that for ourselves, that we aren't meant to be happy 24/7. If you were happy 24/7, you actually wouldn't appreciate being happy, because it would just be how you always were. Do you know what I mean? It's that complacency that we get. So I think it's it's all necessary. And that's all I can say, is that you know, in my own life, like I think back to like just like being and feeling so broken in my life, like just even remembering how that felt is heartbreaking now, because I actually switched off my emotions when I was younger. So I didn't actually feel anything. So now as an adult, when I look back at my life, even as a teenager, I like tap into that like inner teenager. I'm just devastated for her, because she was, you know, going through it. But if she didn't do what she did, I wouldn't be here now. So yeah, I think I would urge anyone to go back through that as well. You know, like there's lots of guided meditations and visualizations on that. And I really do urge everyone to just sit with themselves and do that little bit of work, because I think you'd be really surprised in what comes up for yourself, and you can heal a part of you that maybe is still holding on to something.
Beautiful. You speak about boundaries too, and let's maybe add boundaries into this, because I think that's part of that, perhaps the fall or the autumn process, when you're having time to reflect on your activity of the summer. And I love that metaphor of the season, so I'm going to keep walking with you on that. And so healthy boundaries. And so you use them for your mentoring and coach practice, and you also use it in your personal life, I would imagine. So share that with us, for people who are just starting to onboard these ideas. What boundary setting looks like for you.
Absolutely. Now, I would say that obviously within my toxic masculine energy, I was protecting. So I was very much a martyr. So I would do everything and anything for everyone that needed it, as well as put myself last, you know.
Okay.
And I think this ties in for me, boundaries ties into the self-love concept. So for me, self-love is self-acceptance plus self-respect. So we have quite a fluffy idea of what self-love is in the modern world. But for me, it is that self-respect and self-acceptance. And from that place of self-respect, that is where you can build healthy boundaries, because I think we think that, oh, they need my time more, they need my energy more. But it comes down to always this analogy that you can't give from an empty cup. you just can't. And I tell you that from lived experience, because I did it for so long. I was so burnt out, so broken. And I ended up resenting everyone in my life for it, because I was like, oh, well, you know, I've done this for you, or I've done that for you, you know. And actually, you don't get a medal for it. You don't get any medal for that in the end. So it's actually better to be respectful to yourself. And that's where, again, this tying in of self-love comes in, because if someone needs you that much and you need to say to them, I'm really sorry, I'm really overwhelmed at the moment, can I get back to you on this day? Can I help you on this day? Or can I do this for you in an hour, just so I've got time to like just have a chill for myself for 5 minutes? No one is going to be angry at you. And if they are, that's a mirror of their own insecurities in their own world, because they're not able to do the same thing. And that's very common, because when you start to set boundaries, all the people in your life that don't will start to see it, and they'll be uncomfortable with it because you've never done it before. So you have got a bit of an integration process in that, but the outcome's always richer, because ultimately, if you did that thing for someone, say a friend, for example, needs you to help them move furniture, right? And the movers are coming in 4 hours, you get in from your job, and you've got you haven't eaten lunch. You started work at 7 a.m. It's now 1 in the afternoon. Yeah, you're starving. If you went to help your friend hungry, you would be very resentful, you'd be hungry, you would be aggy, right? If you said to your friend, I'm just going to grab some lunch, I'm going to have a cup of tea, or, I mean, you guys aren't massive tea people, so it'd be coffee. But you know, I'm going to have a coffee. Yeah, I'm going to have something to drink. I'm just going to have 5 minutes at home. I'll be with you at 2:00, right? So you've got an hour's time for yourself. Your friend would then appreciate you more coming fed, and you would be fed. So you would be able to feel stronger, more comfortable, happier to get the job done. And ultimately, everyone would get a better experience out of it. Because also, I think that, you know, these boundaries and self-love also breed a healthy amount of productivity, because when we're burnt out, we're actually like almost, you know, when you're tired and you've got a lot to do and it takes you longer because you're faffing around or you're kind of getting distracted. All of that happens when our time is just loose and the boundaries are loose. Whereas when you set a strong boundary, it's almost like tightening everything up in your life. So everything's more efficient, everything is more succinct. It's just a bit more of a complete circle. And I would always urge people to look at boundaries as a circle around yourself. And then you can create these boundaries, like even a bigger circle around you, which are the closest things, the people, the practices you need to do every day. Then the bigger the circle gets bigger, and there's another circle outside of that for the next layer of things that need to happen. But ultimately, your inner circle is always full. And that is essential for creating a really healthy way of living, because my life's changed completely for it. And don't get me wrong, you know, we're human. We're going to dip in and out of that over and over again. But when you dip out of the boundary, when you realize your cup is slightly empty and you do something, that's when you will have a quick reaction to that and be like, yep, I shouldn't have done that. I need to make sure I'm looking after me again. And then your boundary just gets tighter even more. So it's almost like an elastic band that pulls out and snaps you back in, because you're like, no, I've set this now for myself. And that does again come with the self-respect thing, because again, a lot of us go above and beyond for everyone else in our lives, and we do all of these things for other people. But ultimately, you know, if you're giving yourself away each time like that, I mean, you just get used, you know, and you're not used. You're not something to be used. You are whole and full and worthy of your time and energy. And I think we don't often respect ourselves enough. Like, if that was a friend of yours or a family member that was doing that for someone else, you'd be like, what are you doing? Right? So it's almost about having that respect for yourself to be like, you need to make sure, have you eaten? You know, how many of us say to a partner or a friend, have you eaten? Do you need to eat? You know, but we don't do it for ourselves. So it's just making sure that you are your first priority, and it isn't selfish, because actually everyone will benefit from you having your cup full.
Indeed. And that is, again, I think part of a healthy resilience practice that and you used a perfect word just now, selfish. And I've spoken to people about this, that I put everything on spectrum. So for me, selfishness is on a spectrum. So you have the narcissistic, vainglorious person on one end, it's all about them, all about their world, all about, and then as you've spoken to just now, there's a person who gives themselves away. They're the doormat. And I think they're coming from more, like you said, a depletion or a victim consciousness perspective, which is no judgment. There's no fault in that. It's what happened to you. And but like both of us, we came up from a challenging environment. We recognized that it became salient to us, and then we realized that we had to take tender care of this beingness of ourselves. And so to get to a point that the idea of selfishness should not carry the stigma of the narcissist, but it should not also be the completely drained and incapacitated person who is so selfless that they depleted them. They're already depleted to begin with, but that they. So I guess I'm just echoing what you're saying here, that that proper administration of selfishness, again, on an oscillating sequence of events in whatever's happening in your life, that it's necessary at times to do that. And then, like you said, self-care can be misinterpreted sometimes. Like, it's not pampering, it's not a day at the spa or getting your petty mani or whatever. It's more that it's, like you said, it's more holistic. It's more of an enrichment, because if you are more whole and more enriched in that sense, that you are capable of giving more. I find in my own life, and I'm far from arriving anywhere in terms of awakening or being whole myself, but I find that I can give things away a lot easier and not resent it. I can hold doors for people. I can go out of my way to help somebody and not expect anything in return, because for me it was fulfilling just to be a helpful person, just to be somebody. But like you've pointed out, there's boundaries there, and I don't give of myself, because I think we there's, like, you talk about energy vampires and things like that. There's people who pick up on that subconsciously, and they're like, there's a mark, and they don't do it out of meanness. They're dependent, they're needy, and and they're perhaps a little lazy, and they don't know how to take care. So they're in that process too. So I'll stop rambling about that, but I just think that's perhaps a good echo of what you're saying, is that we have to see balance, we have to see integration in that practice of resilience development, and making ourselves whole enough to be resilient and to be the right friend, or the better friend, or the right family member, or the functional coherent family member or friend.
Absolutely. So, 100%.
Now, I want to touch on something that's huge in your life, because when I thought about you and dancing, I thought, well, what is the origin of dancing? Where does dancing come from? And for me, and I could be way off the mark here, I think it's so spiritual. It is so in touch with our early humanity, going back thousands of years, when we would dance all night around campfires. Doesn't matter what part of the world, it's universal. It's like we all danced around campfires, no matter where we came from. And ultimately, we all came from the diaspora out of Africa. But it's like, and even probably 300,000 years ago, there was some sort of movement that expressed something that was abstracted from all the just very basic necessary things we had to do to survive. It was this sort of just like art, like drawings and etching figurines and things like that. So let's break into dancing, and I want to know about what it sort of your origin story with dancing. I think you started taking ballet at an early age. Let's develop the idea of dancing as recreation, as spiritual, as all those
absolutely things. Well, you're 100% nail on the head there for me, really. So I started about 3 years old doing ballet and tap. And then I kind of stuck at that for a few years. I don't think I loved it then, but it was, again, just a practice. It was something that was regular in my life, that, when you're in adverse situations, as you'll know, that you need some stability in your life to keep you afloat. So that definitely created that regulation for me to be able to function, I would say. So then I stopped that probably about sort of 5 or 6. And then I picked up another style of dance, which is called freestyle, which is kind of like a mixture of jazz and street dance. So a combination of that. And I was actually really good at that, but it didn't last. I think, I don't know if the studio moved, or maybe financially we couldn't afford to go anymore. It could have been a combination of things. So really, I tethered in dance quite a lot. And now dance is a massive part of my family's culture as well. So my family are from Guyana in South America, and we have heavy Caribbean influences. There's also some Bollywood influences as well. So family parties were just, everyone was dancing, especially my nan, who was my mum's mum. And I just have really fond memories of her dancing, like always in the middle at parties and things like that. And it's funny because actually now everyone always says, oh, you know, you dance, you know, you like your nan was a dancer. Obviously she wasn't a professional dancer, but she danced, you know.
Yeah.
And I think maybe there's a little seed of that in there for me, that culturally dance had always been a fun thing to do. And I just had that rhythm in my body just naturally. Even at some of the little parties, I remember dancing at the parties and stuff like that. So then, yeah, I guess I stopped doing obviously the other styles. And then when I got to secondary school, which I think is high school for you guys,
Okay.
one of my friends was doing street dance. So I thought, okay, I'm going to give street dancing a go. And lo and behold, like it was my thing. And I think it was because it was there wasn't a set structure to it. It was more about your personality. You could be expressive, you could be loud, you could be bold, you could be strong. And that's something that I think my body always has been. Like, even though I'm a petite female, I'm quite robust, and you know, I was always called fat because my sister's so slim. I'm not fat at all, but I did wear that badge for a long time. I did think I was fat for a long time. So
Okay.
strong was that something that I could relate to, and I got to embody just myself fully for the first time. I think in that space I was able to just feel seen and heard without judgment and be a leader. And I think that's something that I had to be a leader at home because, you know, the space wasn't fulfilled. But in the dance element, I could choose to be, and I could just express myself fully, and it was appreciated. So I think that was really the beautiful space of that. And then I continued to do it. And I think none of my family expected me to do it for a career. You know, every time I bumped into someone, even when I went on to college and university and all these things to do dance, everyone would always say to me, what are you going to do next? What are you going to do next? And it, you know, it's only up to a few years ago that people have actually stopped asking me, what am I going to do next? You know, because actually I've done some quite good things now. So people actually can't say any more than that, you know.
Yeah.
And it's that judgment that I think the arts and creativity has. You know, people are always thinking, well, it's not a sustainable career. Well, actually, you know, nothing's really a sustainable career. Yes, you can make a solid income, but are you fulfilled? Are you happy? Probably not, you know. And I think, you know, I'm not judging anyone that has a sustainable career or, you know, works in an office or whatever. But, you know, if it doesn't set your soul on fire, then you can't judge other people that are doing that, you know. And I think that's, for me, I guess, something that we're working on in humanity, isn't it? I'm sure you are the same with judgment. I think we're trying to be, yeah, more open-minded on that front. So yeah, I guess for me, dance has been one, routine and regularity for my nervous system, as well as for my, you know, just talking to multiple people as well. You know, I think that's been a definite release for me, is that when I got to secondary school and I did high school and I did street dance, I also then started to do ballet, tap and jazz again, because I was aware that I was going to need to go to college and I needed those requirements. So then I had multiple dance schools I was going to, so every night of the week I had some sort of form of physical activity that was on. Again, like I said, the regularity, the different communities of people, the opening up to create more conversations for myself, and the release, the physical release, you know, like anxiety and stress build in the body like knots. So actually physically releasing it out for me was doing more wonders than I could ever imagine. You know, I wasn't storing up the trauma in my body. It was more still kind of in my soul, probably more than it was in my physical body, because I was kept just releasing it out through the dancing, you know. I was blissfully unaware of this at the time. And yeah, and then it just built from there, really, to be honest. So, you know, again, within this is polarity, because it was a beautiful experience of me expressing myself and finding freedom through dance, but equally I was being judged. I was being, you know, put up against other dancers, and, like, you know, as dance industry is, but we do it because we love it, and that's the difference, you know. And I think when I got to the pandemic and I was going to move to the US, I had to have a word with myself and think, do I still love it as much as I did at 18? The answer's no. And it's because the industry's changed and I've changed, you know. And I think it's this idea of, you will train your whole life as a dancer to be one of many. And that's lovely. And I enjoyed that at the time. But what I've realized my whole life is I've never fit into a pattern, never fit into a box. I can't really be beside other people and blend in. It's just never been part of who I am. And I think I've really realized that now fully for myself. So I still do the odd thing with dancing, and I still do the odd job here and there, but I think, yeah, in terms of pursuing it as a career, it's not there anymore for me. But I love it. I still teach it. It's a tool, and I want other people to have that experience of expressing themselves through it, you know. And for dancers that do want to pursue the career in dance, I would say, you know, if you love it more than anything in the world, keep going. But if you don't, it will chew you up and spit you back out more times than any other trauma that I've had in my life, trust me, you know. But that's where resilience comes in. And I think that's why I did keep going in the industry longer than probably a lot of people did that I know, that had setbacks. You know, a lot of people that, you know, maybe had a couple of auditions and then they didn't get anything. They just went into, you know, doing something else instead. So yeah, you got to love it enough and you got to be resilient enough for it, I think. Because, well, saying that, the industry is a lot different to what it is like now, what it was. You know, we'd queue up for hours to get into a room to dance for people, whereas now you can get online submission and just submit a video and, you know, comfort of your own home. So yeah, I mean, I don't take anything back. As I said, you know, I'm grateful for everything that it taught me, everything that I am now, and, you know, the fact that I can use it in my practices. So yeah, I guess I don't want it to be like it was a negative, because it wasn't at all. Like, I'm very grateful for dance, and yeah, really beautiful practice and experience, and anyone can do it, you know. And that's really now in my practices as a mentor and a coach, is more about, you know, for everyone to just connect with their body. I think that's something that we just take for granted. You know, you can just put a song on and move your body, no judgment, just like, even if it's just shaking out, it doesn't have to be to the time of the music, you know. It's just that, as you said to start off with, that's in our human DNA, is that we have that function to be able to move, you know, and that drums have been part of, like, you know, generations of culture, you know. All of these things, that music has been a huge part of our human animal instincts, you know. So I think to deny yourself of that is denying a massive part of who you are as a human being. So I think it's always about embracing all of that, regardless of, like, if you look good doing it, no one cares. Do you know what I mean? At raves and parties, no one's actually looking at everyone's dance moves thinking, oh, they're a really good dancer. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah,
If you're worried, if you're that's it. If you're at a party looking at someone else dancing and not enjoying yourself, that's about you. That's not about them.
Yeah. That's a you thing, right? As they
Absolutely.
say. Yeah. And, you know, I watched one of your dance videos on your YouTube channel, which I'll have links down below for people to access. And you were leading a group of people. And as you just said, this is to me, it struck me as a good metaphor for your mentoring practice and your coaching, that you're in front of people ostensibly, and you're giving them permission to be themselves and let that
Absolutely,
that chi, if you will, flow through them. That life force
yes,
just is coming out. Whereas otherwise they may have been so inhibited that, you know, I'm not gonna get up there and make a fool out of myself. And I mean, I'm there. I would be the same way. I'm like, I'm not gonna, you know, try to pretend like what is that, Elaine on Seinfeld, where she was doing that crazy dance, you know. All of us have that fear until we pass through that crucible, and then we understand that it's okay. Like you said, there's no judgment. I mean, it's a beautiful place to express yourself. But when I was watching you're leading this group of people in dance, I thought, you know, that's a beautiful metaphor for the you being the midwife of transformation, or the mid-person of transformation, because, you know, midwifery can be open to any gender or whatever. But you're there as that shaman, as that midwife to that process of allowing people to break through themselves or their constructs, to be free for a moment, and then they can go back, put on their normal persona. Yeah,
100%. And I'll tell you what, that is one of the greatest gifts I have with connecting with people. Like, I cannot tell you, like, how dance is just universal. I get people from all over the world come to the classes. Like, these are at Pineapple Dance Studios in London. It's the biggest probably studio people would know from outside of London. And yeah, people from all over the world that don't even speak the language, that just feel, like you said, the chi. It's that energy that we have inside of us, that something connects. And it's wonderful, you know, even seeing that shy wallflower come in and be a bit timid, and then at the end they're like just giving it everything they've got, and I'm like, yes. But that's why I teach dance, for that reason, because for me, all of my classes are embedded into my mentoring practice. You know, it's about self-love, it's about self-expression, it's about connecting with yourself. And always at the start of the lesson, it's like, there's no judgment in here. And so many people, you know, I'm inundated with messages from people saying, thank you for creating a safe space. And that is my biggest joy. Like, you know, that's so wonderful. And actually, even in my mentoring spaces, you know, even if it's one-to-one clients, I think I pride myself in that, because I know what it's like to not feel seen and heard. So everything I do now, that is on my forefront, is that in everything I do, I want to create that space that I didn't have for myself. And I think that is why it's also important to me because I'm the embodiment of everything that I stand for. So everything I talk about and everything I say is based on my own lived experience. So it's just really everything I am is just whole and wholesome because it's who and why I do this. You know, I am it. I've been through this journey over and over again. And that's why I'm teaching it, because I know the way, you know, and we all have a different journey and a different variation of that. My way might not work for someone else, but I'll do everything I can to try and help that person regardless, because, you know, a different stage of my life, I had different situations. You know, some people use dance, some people don't. Some people want to talk in a group, some people want individual. And I think it's just when you have the ability to listen and create a space for people, you know, that's already 90% of the work.
Yeah, absolutely. We agreed that we would keep you for about an hour here, and so we're about 10 to 15 minutes away from that. So I was thinking for this last little bit of our conversation, rather than sort of the cliche, like, well, what do you have planned for the future? I would want to ask a question in that vein, but I want to broaden it out so it's not restrictive in any way or declarative in any way. What are you visioning for yourself? What can you share with the audience that you're currently doing, and what do you think your trajectory might look like, given your intentions in this present moment? Let's frame it that way, and that way it's really broad, so that spontaneity can exist within your creative structure.
Absolutely. No, well, I work with a women's charity called Our Dance, and they are advancing women's aspirations with dance. So I do that anyway. And actually that was a real inspiration point for me, because that opened a lot of doors. So, you know, this year I really fully went into my business and expanded. So I have journals that are available, one on Etsy, one on Amazon. But now I'm thinking about creating an academy. So that's definitely what I'm working on at the moment. So anyone in the world can join the academy, and it's just a space where, again, it's a safe space. It's like it's a monthly, I guess, payment where you have like group calls. There's also access to all of my other trainings and workshops that I have that are all video based, so you can catch up whenever you feel like it. And there's touch points with me throughout that. So that's something really important that I wanted to create, because then at any moment, anyone can join in. They can be a part of the community. They can connect with each other and be on this beautiful journey of growth. And that container is for 12 months. And I just feel like that's really important for me, because as I said, I've spoken about these cycles. So, you know, when you're in the container like that, you can work with someone for the cycles, connect with people you might have connected with before, but equally sharing the same experience, you know, regardless of whether it's, you know, relationship trauma, whether it's childhood trauma, or whether it's just insecurity or a lack of confidence. You know, there's a golden thread within us, and that's for women. So that's really what I'm working on at the moment. And and then in terms of that, obviously I've got my one-to-one clients. I've also applied for funding to go into schools. So a lot of my work is school led. You know, I work with all students as well, and just about confidence and motivation. So there's lots of strings to my bow. I would say that, you know, it's really important for me that, you know, motivation and inspiration through my story is one, you know, overcoming difficult challenges and the blocks within us are another one. And obviously using dance as well as that, meditation, journaling, all of these practices combined are what make me who I am and why I'm doing it. So ultimately there's multiple ways people can work with me, you know, through the academy, through my one-to-one containers. Even if someone just wants to connect with me and just have a one-off session, that's also what I do, because I think sometimes it's not a deep embedded trauma, it's just maybe something that's been niggling a little bit of time. And, you know, in that session we could pull that all apart and they'll just have clarity to move forward. And that's happened a few times. You know, some people have just booked a one-off and then messaged me a few months later being like, I can't believe that it was that, and I've managed to, you know, decipher it, and thank you for your help. You know, so I've got lots of ways people can work with me, but ultimately my life's purpose, I feel like, is to build this legacy, you know, to keep building, to keep growing. You know, my mission in my life is to or my vision, should I say, is to help like 1 billion people, because I just think there's so many people in this world that need this help, need this guidance, need this understanding. And if I can reach those people in any form of a way, whether it's on YouTube, you know, I'd love to do a TED talk, and I do public speaking all the time, you know, just about sharing my story, how dance has helped that, but also all the other practices that have made me who I am within that. You know, ultimately I just want this world to be a better place, and I also want to combat suicide. And I think that's, I guess the opposite of where I am right now is that, like there's I guess it's the antithesis, isn't it? It's like the authentic confidence and that knowing, the deep knowing of yourself, and the other side of that is not having that. So I think, if I can help people out of that situation, whether it's just even 3 steps, I always say to my clients, it's like, I can't give you the whole alphabet, I can give you A to C and you can work on the rest, and it's those steps. And I'm always there as a helping hand when people need it, but I'm ultimately not a miracle worker. I can't get you out of it. You have to do the work, but I can guide you every step of the way, and I can hold your hand while you do it. So I think, I guess I have big plans for my life, and I'm fully prepared and ready to take on everything, because, a massive part of where I'm now would have been a dream for, the younger me. And I feel like, I'm here now doing this. So yeah, I can absolutely do anything I want to, and so can anyone else listening. And I think more than anything, I'd love everyone to just understand that, your past doesn't dictate your future. And actually, we aren't in autopilot, and yes, the pages of trauma or hardship have been written for you, but you can pick up the pen and rewrite the rest. And I think that's that's really it for me. My little saying on my journal is, you are the only you there is, and that's your superpower. So it's like, embrace every part of you, accept, the parts that you're not happy with, or the parts that, you wish were different. Accept that anyway, because it's who you were. It doesn't have to be who you are now. And use that as your alchemy, as your transmutation. Then that's where the liquid gold comes in. That's where you can shine your light really bright. And that's really why my podcast is called Permission to Shine, because it's, throughout my life, I felt silenced, I felt small, and I felt like I had to bulldoze for every situation, because really I didn't give myself permission to just be myself fully, and to just be in this, like we talk about the feminine energy, like be in my own light. So now I'm standing in my own light, and I'm hoping that I'm that lighthouse for so many people that are lost.
And speaking of lighthouses, I like that you also, and this is something I picked up in another conversation that you had, that you help people acknowledge the shadow and do the shadow work. A lot of times people, and this is with not trying to say this in judgment, but facing the shadow can be difficult. And we get into this, one of my philosophers that I follow calls it the cult of innocence, where we sort of only seek the light. We only seek transformation in that regard. But transformation has to be holistic. It has to be bringing, like you said earlier in the conversation, you're bringing your, whatever it is, your shadow, your demon, whatever it is, with you, you're in right relation with that. You're not in conflict with it anymore. You're not letting it overpower you. It is just this aspect that has been properly framed and constrained, and all these things that you can move forward. And I like that. That's part of what you do. And I hope I'm not imposing that on you, but I believe I heard that in other conversations.
You're so right. I think because there's so much to everything that I do, I think there's different variations of everything, but ultimately it is that, yes. And I like to say the shadow's a bit like Peter Pan. I don't know if anyone's seen the cartoon Peter Pan, but how the shadow follows him around, and the shadow almost has the lead, so when you're in those dark times, it's like the shadow's leading you. The shadow's the ego telling you you're not good enough, you're not brave enough, you're not rah, rah, rah. And actually, when you can take the shadow, look into it, and see through all of those things that it's holding on to, actually the shadow becomes less potent, and it starts to fall behind you, and then you can walk in the light and the shadow will fall behind. And equally, the shadow's always going to be with you for every stage of your journey. So when you need to pause and catch up with it and look in again, you can. But ultimately, it's just giving you that space to, I guess, a boundary between you and your trauma, shadow, whatever you want to call it. And again, it's that boundary of that fierce self-acceptance, self-respect, which is the self-love.
I now know you. I've now collaborated with you, and we've integrated our intentions, and I intend to follow your work, and I will join you in that visualization process for your academy, and offer whatever however we want to frame that, good energy, good vibes, good intentions, that you can consider me an ally. And I hope that the audience has learned something from having met you and experienced what you're doing, where you've been. And I will lastly say that working with women, if we again go to the masculine and feminine, that I can't imagine a future, and I say this sort of rhetorically, what empowered womanhood looks like, what an empowered female population looks like in this earth. So I am behind you 100% on that, and helping women to transform their lives, and men too, because I think when men can balance and integrate themselves, they are there then to help facilitate as partners, as co-creators, as friends, family, blah, yada, 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 to help that process. And so I am saying in all sincerity and absolute clarity that we need that. And thank you for doing that. It's just something that I think is absolutely necessary. We live in a deeply patriarchal culture in the West, in the so-called modern advanced world. I don't judge that, because it's been good and bad. There's a cost benefit analysis to that, but there's a lot of baggage that we can start to unpack and address as to what the last few hundred years of our Western culture has had in the way of cost, and that we need to address that in order to move forward, take the best of whatever we're doing and integrate it with what I think you're aspiring to, with the empowerment of the feminine, the female, the divine aspect of ourselves. I go that far as to say that the feminine is the divine aspect. The masculine is more of the utility. In primitive times, it was kind of it's like you say about the ego. It's what keeps us alive and keeps us going. It's part of what we have to do. But we don't need to kill and fight anymore to survive.
Yeah,
we need to be
absolutely
clever and wise to survive.
And that's the divine masculine, is when it's there, it's embodied, but it doesn't need to act. It's just, it knows. It knows itself.
Yeah.
And it takes steps based on integrity and not invalidation.
Yes, that's a beautiful way to frame that. Thank you. Thank you for that. But yes, I honor your path. I honor your journey, because again, I think the empowerment of women and that feminine aspect of our beingness, whether we're men, women, or whatever, is absolutely essential at this sort of, we're always at a crossroads. We're always at a nexus as a civilization, but it changes, it morphs, and it moves, and we're chasing it. And I think at where we are at this point, if we could nail it down to a time vector or whatever, that's important, that we need to do that. And it hasn't been given that regard in the past. I don't think big, large conversations and large groups of people have said, yeah, we really need to elevate women to a higher status in society. The women have been doing that, they've been drowned, but they've been drowned out. And I think, slowly, like they say, what did Martin Luther King say, the arc of justice, and slowly towards, the right path. Yeah. So anyway, I'll stop babbling, because like I said, the bottom line is, I salute you and I honor you for what you're doing, and I think it's very laudable and very necessary. So Godspeed to you in that.
Thank you for this conversation as well. It's been really lovely to connect and hear your ethos on it as well. Really nice to share the space with you.
Yes, this was a dialogue, and but I wanted to platform you and help distribute your ideas and thoughts. But thank you for sharing that space with me and letting me talk a little bit too, to engage you. I could just do very linear questions and short little sound bites, but sometimes if I'm invested in something, I want to also engage the person. So I appreciate you allowing me that space to converse with you and dialogue with you. And yes, absolutely. And I thank you and I honor you again. So again, to the YouTube audience, all socials and relevant links, Sherisse's website will be down below in the description field. You can follow her work there, and I encourage you to do that. I think she's on the right path to helping a lot of people out. So if you could be a part of that, that would be awesome. And I thank you for your time and participation with us today. So Sherisse, like I said, I will continue to follow your work and watch the unfolding, the continual blossoming that is you and what you do. So, and I will say goodbye to you after we stop record, but to the YouTube audience, thank you guys so much again for being an observer of this conversation. So you all take care.